Hey everyone, Amanda Delvey here, and welcome to my brand new passion project, a channel I've been dreaming about for years. Think of this as my creative baby, a place where true darkness meets storytelling, and where every tale will leave you questioning what's real, and what's lurking just out of sight. What you're about to hear is one of the most chilling, bizarre, and dangerously real stories I have ever heard. Cults? They're not fiction. They're hiding in plain sight, maybe in your town, your street, or even the person sitting right next to you. This tale takes place in a quiet Ohio town, where a betrayal leads to a nightmare of ancient rituals, all-headed monsters, and a secret door to... well, you'll have to listen to believe it. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I'm Amanda Delvey, and together, let's uncover the mysteries of haunting tales. Let's dive in. Let me tell you about the night I learned boredom is a gift. The kind of gift you don't appreciate until it's ripped away, replaced by something else. My name's Lucas. I'm from Springwood, Ohio, where the most exciting thing that ever happened was Old Man Ritter's prize cow escaping into the Taco Bell parking lot. Or at least that's what I thought until the scratching started. It began after the party. You know the one. The kind your ex-girlfriend begs you to attend so you can move on, which really means she wants you to watch her move on with your best friend. Emily had been nagging me for weeks. Jake's throwing it at his uncle's farmhouse. It'll be fun. Fun. Right. Jake and I had been friends since middle school, back when fun meant skipping class to fish at the creek and swear we saw Bigfoot in the woods. But after I lost my job at the auto shop and my aunt's cancer diagnosis, fun felt like a foreign language. I went anyway. Not because I wanted to, but because the silence in my room had started to itch. You ever notice how loud silence gets when you're alone too long? It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the creak of the house settling, the hum of the fridge, the way the shadows in the corner seemed to twitch. So I drove to that godforsaken farmhouse, where the bonfire smoke clung to my clothes and the beer tasted like regret. And there they were. Emily and Jake, tangled up against the fridge like a bad YouTube video. I didn't yell. Didn't cry. Just walked out. But Jake called the next morning. Not to apologize. To ask, "You gonna tell my girlfriend?" Turns out, Jake's girlfriend was the mayor's daughter. Small town royalty. The kind of relationship that could impact his future, as if my future hadn't just been lit on fire. I told him I didn't care. Hung up. And that's when the scratching started. At first, it was faint. A dry, skittering sound under the bed. I blamed mice. Mom set traps, but they stayed empty. Then the noises got louder. Purposeful. Like something was dragging its claws slowly, lazily, across the floorboards. I'd lie there at 3 a.m., sweat soaking my sheets, staring at the ceiling while the scratching echoed under me. Mom said it was stress. The doctor said it was insomnia. But I knew better. That's when Ethan found me. Ethan was the kind of guy who made you forget the world was on fire. We'd crossed paths at the gas station, me buying energy drinks, him arguing with the clerk about the lack of vegan jerky. He had this energy, like a caffeinated philosopher, ranting about conspiracy theories and indie horror films. "You look like you've been hugged by a dementor," he said, tossing me a Snickers. Need a distraction? For weeks, Ethan was my distraction. We'd drive to the abandoned drive-in, blast the thing on his laptop, and talk about how every small town has a secret. "Springwood's no different," he'd say, grinning. "Have you ever heard of the Owl House?" I had. Everyone had. A crumbling mansion on Elm Street, half swallowed by ivy. Kids dared each other to throw rocks at its windows, swore they heard whispers in the woods behind it. Urban legend, I said. Ethan's smile tightened. Legends exist for a reason. He invited me to a gathering there. Just a few friends, he said. No pressure. But pressure was all I felt anymore, in my chest, in my skull, in the way the scratching had started to follow me into daylight. So I went. The owl house loomed like a rotten tooth. The porch groaned under my boots, and the air smelled sweet rotten, like fruit left in the sun. A man answered the door, bald, no eyebrows, his skin waxy and smooth. "Ethan's inside," he said, gripping my shoulder. His fingers were cold. The living room was full of guys our age, sipping amber liquid from crystal glasses. Normal faces, normal clothes, but the silence was wrong. No laughter. No small talk. Just low murmurs, like they were at a funeral. Ethan waved me over, his eyes bright. "Knew you'd come." They took my phone first. Dropped it into a lockbox. Then my clothes. "Trust me," Ethan said as I stood shivering in that peeling bathroom, the bald man wrapping me in scratchy black cloth. The blindfold smelled like burned hair. But I peeked. They led me down a hallway lined with portraits, old men in suits, their eyes scratched out. The air buzzed, thick and electric. The chapel was small, wooden pews facing an altar draped in black. Hooded figures chanted words that made my teeth ache. Then it walked in. Tall. Too tall. Its head was an owl's, glassy eyes, beak sharp as a blade. It moved like a person, bare feet slapping stone, but the sound was wrong. Wet. Guttural. The hooded men bowed. It stopped in front of me. Rotten copper filled my nose. The thing tilted its head, and I felt its hunger, not for flesh, but for something deeper. Something that squirmed. I woke up on Ethan's couch. "You passed out," he said, handing me coffee. Too much bourbon. But my mouth tasted like pennies. My clothes reeked of smoke. And on my wrist, a red mark, raised and angry, shaped like an owl's talon. The mark on my wrist didn't heal. It spread. Thin red lines branched up my arm like veins, pulsing when I slept. I told myself it was an infection. Allergic reaction. Anything but the truth. But then the dreams started. I'd be back in the owl house, strapped to that altar, the owl-headed thing leaning over me. Only now, its beak wasn't empty. It dripped black oil that burned my skin, and its voice, God, its voice, was 100 whispers stitched together. Hungry, it hissed. So hungry. I'd wake up choking, my sheets soaked in sweat, the red lines glowing faintly in the dark. Ethan acted like nothing happened. He'd pick me up for coffee, rant about the latest horror movie, laugh too loud at his own jokes. But sometimes I'd catch him staring at my wrist. Smiling. "You're part of something now," he said one night as we drove past the owl house. The windows were lit, shadows moving behind the glass. Something bigger. I didn't ask what. Didn't want to know. But the itching got worse. I'd scratch my arm raw in the shower, blood swirling down the drain, only for the lines to heal by morning. Then the scratching came back. Not under the bed. In the walls. In the vents. A relentless scritch 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 that followed me to work, to the grocery store, into my dreams. Mom heard it too. "Raccoons," she said, setting traps in the attic. The traps stayed empty. One night, I broke. I tore my room apart, flipping the mattress, ripping up carpet, until I found it, a hole in the wall behind my dresser. Tiny. No bigger than a quarter. I pressed my eye to it, expecting mouse droppings or cobwebs. Something pressed back. A black pupil, ringed with gold. Watching. I screamed. Mom came running, but by the time she got there, the hole was gone. Chloe found me a week later. I was at the gas station, buying Advil and a stale donut, when she stepped out of the shadows by the dumpsters. We'd gone on one date years ago, dinner at the diner, a clumsy kiss in her car, but she'd ghosted me after. Now here she was, her cheeks hollow, her eyes wild. "They marked you," she said, grabbing my wrist. Her nails bit into the red lines. "The monastery owns you now." I yanked free. "What the hell are you talking about?" She looked over her shoulder, her breath fogging in the cold. "The owl house. The rituals. You think Ethan's your friend? He's their recruiter. Finds lost boys, gains their trust, feeds them to the watcher." A truck rumbled past, its headlights slicing through the dark. For a second, Chloe's face looked skeletal. "They tried to take me last year. I got away. Burned the mark off." She shoved up her sleeve. A twisted scar ran up her forearm, an owl with its wings spread, the skin bubbled and raw. "You're crazy," I said, backing toward my car. She laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "Then why are you here, Lucas? Why'd you follow me out?" I froze. I hadn't. Had I? "It's already in your head," she whispered. "The watcher's hungry. And you're the main course." We drove to the old grain silos. Chloe's idea. "They don't come here anymore," she said, parking behind a collapsed shed. "Not since the accident." The silos loomed against the moon, rusted and groaning. Inside the shed, the walls were covered in symbols, painted in something dark and flaky. "Blood," Chloe said. The floor was littered with burnt candles, animal bones, Polaroids of girls in white robes. "The convent," she said, kicking a ratty tarp aside. Underneath was a trapdoor. "They're the other half. The monastery's rivals. Women only. They tried to cheat the watcher last year. Offered a fake sacrifice. Now it's pissed. Why tell me this?" She grabbed my arm, her fingers cold. "Because you're the trade. A life for a soul. That's how it works. And if you don't run, they'll carve you open and feed your heart to that thing." A cold breeze swept through the shed. The Polaroids fluttered, and for a second, the girls in the photos seemed to turn their heads. Watching. "Why me?" I asked. Chloe's grip tightened. "Because you're weak. Alone. Perfect prey." The words stung. But she was right. Ethan called as I drove home. "Where've you been?" "Nowhere." "Liar." His voice was flat. "Gary saw you at the silos. With her." I almost swerved off the road. "Who's Gary?" "The guy who answered the door." "Bald? No eyebrows? Ring a bell?" A pause. "You're playing a dangerous game, Lucas. The watcher doesn't like cheaters." The line went dead. That night, I shoved a dresser in front of my bedroom door. It didn't help. The scratching came back. Louder. Closer. Scritch, scritch, scritch. I pressed my ear to the wall. The sound moved. Up the stairs. Down the hall. Stopped outside my door. Something knocked. 3 sharp raps. "Lucas," a voice whispered. Not Ethan's. Not Chloe's. Guttural. Wet. Hungry. I didn't sleep again. Chloe showed up at my house again 2 nights later. No knock. No warning. Just her face pressed against the living room window, pale as a ghost, her breath fogging the glass. Mom screamed. I didn't. By then, I was too numb to scream. I met her on the porch. She looked worse, hair matted, lips cracked, a fresh cut on her cheek. They're coming tonight, she said. For the trade. What trade? Your life for a soul. The Watcher's hungry, and the convent's offering. She shoved a Polaroid into my hand. It showed a woman in a white robe holding a jar. Inside the jar floated a human eye, its pupils split like a cat's. They tried to cheat last year. Used to fake. Now they need a real sacrifice. You. I laughed. It sounded unhinged, even to me. Why would they want me? Because you're marked. The monastery's property. Stealing you? That's a middle finger to Ethan and his cult. She grabbed my shoulders. But if we play this right, we can burn both groups to the ground. Mom's voice cut through the dark. Lucas? Who's out there? Chloe vanished into the shadows. Midnight. The river. Don't be late. The Maumee River looked black under the moon. Chloe waited by the water, her hands stuffed in a stolen police jacket. She'd borrowed her ex's cruiser, she said. In case we need to make a quick exit. You're insane, I said. And you're dead if we don't do this. She tossed me a flashlight. Stay close. We followed the riverbank to a collapsed dock. Beneath it, hidden by weeds, was a trapdoor. They meet underground, Chloe whispered. Old bootlegger tunnels from the 20s. The stairs creaked. The air smelled like wet earth and copper. At the bottom, a narrow tunnel stretched into darkness. Symbols covered the walls, owls, eyes, spirals. Chloe traced one with her finger. They've been here for decades. Maybe longer. Voices echoed ahead. We crouched behind a rusted support beam. A dozen women in white robes stood in a circle, chanting. In the center lay a deer carcass, its ribs cracked open. A woman in a feathered mask raised a knife. Ex umbre and loose. The deer's entrails writhed. Chloe gagged. They're waking it up. Waking what? Before she could answer, the ground trembled. The women scattered as the carcass twisted, bones snapping, flesh bubbling. Something clawed its way out, a mass of antlers and fur and too many eyes. It screeched, a sound that ripped through my skull. Run! Chloe yelled. We didn't get far. The tunnel collapsed ahead, dirt raining down. The thing shambled toward us, its eyes glowing gold. Chloe fumbled with her keys. The car. Go. We burst into the open air, the thing's howls echoing behind us. The cruiser's engine roared to life. Where now? I shouted. The owl house. She grinned, wild. Time to return the favor. Ethan waited on the porch. He wasn't alone. The bald man, Gary, stood beside him, along with 5 others in black hoods. They looked different. Paler. Thinner. Like their skin didn't fit right. You brought a date, Ethan said, nodding at Chloe. Cute. Chloe stepped forward. We're ending this. Ethan laughed. You're feeding this. He snapped his fingers. The hooded men lunged. Chloe ducked, jabbing a knife into one's thigh. I swung the flashlight, cracking another's jaw. But there were too many. They pinned us, cold hands digging into my arms. Ethan leaned close. You had potential, Lucas. Could have been one of us. Now? He shrugged. You're just meat. They dragged us inside. The chapel stank of burnt hair and rot. The watcher stood at the altar, its owl head tilted. Hungry, it hissed. Chloe spat in Ethan's face. Rot in hell. He wiped his cheek. You first. They strapped her to the altar. The watcher's beak lowered. No. I thrashed, but Gary's grip was iron. Chloe met my eyes. The jar. Break the. The watcher struck. Blood sprayed. Chloe's scream cut off. Something inside me snapped. The red lines on my arm moved. They lashed out like whips, slicing through rope, flesh, bone. Gary's head hit the floor. Ethan stumbled back, clutching his throat. What the hell are you? I didn't know. Didn't care. The lines wrapped around the watcher, squeezing. It screeched, thrashing, but I squeezed harder. Chloe's body slid off the altar, lifeless. Ethan fled. The others followed. I collapsed beside Chloe, the lines retreating. Her eyes were open, glassy. In her hand, she clutched a Polaroid, the jar with the split pupil eye. I smashed it against the altar. The watcher exploded in a burst of black sludge. The police found me at dawn, covered in blood, clutching Chloe's body. They called it a gang ritual. Said Ethan and his crew were meth dealers. Chloe? A runaway. They didn't believe me. But the red lines are still there. Growing. Hungry. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the watcher's voice. Mine. The hunger started slow. A gnawing in my gut that Advil couldn't touch. Then the cravings. Rare steak. Raw eggs. Things I'd never eaten before. But the red lines, they wanted more. Mom noticed. You look pale, she'd say, eyeing my untouched dinner. You sleeping? I wasn't. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe's body on that altar. Heard the snap of the watcher's beak. Felt the red lines writhing under my skin like living things. Then the Polaroids started appearing. The first was taped to my windshield after work. A blurry shot of the owl house, its windows glowing. The second slid under my door, Ethan and Gary standing in the woods, their faces gaunt, eyes blacked out with marker. The third showed me. Sleeping. The red lines glowing faintly in the dark. No note. No demands. Just a message, we're watching. Ethan found me at the gas station. I was chugging coffee, trying to stay awake, when his reflection appeared behind me in the cooler glass. Miss me? He said, leaning against the snack aisle. His throat was bandaged, his voice a rasp. I spun, coffee scalding my hand. What do you want? To thank you. He grinned, showing teeth too sharp. Turns out, killing the watcher just pissed off the bigger ones. Bullshit. He lifted his shirt. Red lines coiled around his ribs, pulsing. You're not special, Lucas. You're a fuse. And we're gonna burn this town to the ground. The clerk shouted, no loitering. Ethan winked. Midnight. The silos. Don't be late. Chloe's grave was fresh. No headstone yet, just a patch of dirt under a sickly pine. I sat cross-legged, her Polaroid in my hand, the one with the jar and the split pupil eye. What am I supposed to do? I whispered. Wind rustled the trees. For a second, I smelled vanilla. Her perfume. The ground shifted. A skeletal hand burst through the dirt, clutching a mason jar. Inside floated an eye, her eye, pupil split. I ran. The silos were lit with bonfires. Men in black hoods and women in white robes stood in a loose circle, chanting. Ethan stood at the center, arms raised. Tonight, we merge. Tonight, we ascend. Gary stepped forward, his bald head gleaming. He held a knife to a bound girl's throat, Miriam, the mayor's daughter. Jake's ex. She sobbed into her gag. A life for a soul. Ethan shouted. A door for a god. The crowd echoed, a door for a god. I stepped into the firelight. Let her go. Ethan laughed. Or what? You'll itch me to death. The red lines flared. They lashed out, slicing the ropes around Miriam's wrists. She stumbled free, but Gary grabbed her hair. Enough. The ground trembled. The crowd parted as something crawled from the woods, a mass of antlers and feathers, its dozens of eyes glowing gold. The Watcher. But bigger. Wrong. You didn't kill it, Ethan whispered. You fed it. Miriam screamed. The Watcher lunged, tearing Gary in half. Blood rained. The crowd scattered. Ethan grabbed my arm. Open the door. What door? He pointed. Between the silos, the air rippled. A shape formed, a massive door, warped and pulsing, covered in locks. The gateway, Ethan said. Only the marked can open it. The red lines burned. My vision blurred. The door called to me, its voice 1,000 whispers. Open. Feast. Become. Miriam tackled Ethan. They rolled into the fire. I ran to the door, the Watcher's howls at my back. The locks were shaped like owls. Like eyes. Like me. I pressed my palm to the wood. The door opened. The world peeled away. The silos, the fire, the screams, all gone. I stood in a field under a green sky, wheat brushing my knees. A farmhouse loomed ahead, its porch swing creaking. Mom stepped out. Lucas? Lunch is ready, honey. But her eyes were wrong. All of them. The farmhouse was perfect. Too perfect. The paint gleamed white, the porch swing swayed in a breeze that didn't exist, and the smell of apple pie hung in the air. Mom smiled, her face stretched tight. Come inside, Lucas. You're safe now. But her eyes, God, her eyes, were black voids dotted with stars. 6 of them. Blinking at odd intervals. I backed away. You're not her. Her smile didn't waver. Of course I am, honey. Don't you recognize your own mother? The wheat field rustled. Figures emerged, Ethan, Chloe, Jake, Emily. Their faces flawless, their eyes wrong. They waved, beckoning me toward the house. Stop, I whispered. Chloe tilted her head. Stop what? This is what you wanted. No more pain. No more hunger. The red lines under my skin pulsed. They didn't itch anymore. They ached. I ran. The field stretched endlessly. The sky shifted colors, green to purple to a bruise-like yellow. The figures followed, their footsteps synced to my heartbeat. You can't outrun this, Lucas, Ethan called. This is home now. I stumbled. The ground gave way, plunging me into black water. It filled my lungs, thick and oily. When I surfaced, I was in the Owl House chapel. The Watcher waited. Not the owl-headed thing. Not the massive antlers. Me. My reflection stared back, red lines glowing under its skin, eyes replaced by swirling galaxies. Pathetic, it said. You opened the door but won't walk through. What are you? It laughed, my laugh, twisted. A custodian. A gardener. This place? It's a greenhouse. And you're the seed. The walls peel back, revealing endless fields of human-shaped wheat, their faces frozen in silent screams. They tried to fight too, the reflection said. Now they're fertilizer. The red lines burst from my arms, slashing at the reflection. It dissolved into smoke, its laughter echoing. You'll give in. Everyone does. I woke in the real world. Sort of. The silos were gone. So was the town. The wood stretched endlessly, trees bent into spirals, their bark oozing black sap. The sky pulsed like a living thing. Chloe stood over me. Or something wearing her skin. Her eyes were normal. Too normal. Get up. We're not done. I scrambled back. You're dead. She yanked me to my feet. Dead's a relative term here. Come on. We walked for hours. Days? Time didn't work. The hunger did. My stomach gnawed itself, and the red lines throbbed, urging me to feed. Chloe stopped at a river of thick, shimmering liquid. Drink. Hell no. She cupped the liquid and drank. It's memory. The Watcher's food. I sipped. Pain exploded, not mine. A woman's voice screamed, "Don't let them take the baby." A man's laughter. Fire. So much fire. I jerked back. What is this? The Watcher's leftovers. Every fear, every death, it hoards them. She pointed downstream. The door's there. We close it, this ends. Why should I trust you? She lifted her shirt. Red lines coiled around her ribs. Because I'm just like you now. And if we don't stop this, we'll end up fertilizer too. The door stood in a clearing, warped in breathing. Locks covered it, some rusted, some flesh, some singing in languages I shouldn't understand. Chloe pressed her palm to the wood. It's keyed to us. Our pain. Our hunger. The locks clicked open one by one. The Watcher appeared behind us. Not my reflection. Not the owl. Everything. A tower of eyes and wings and teeth, blotting out the sky. It spoke in every voice I'd ever heard, Mom, Ethan, Chloe, the scratching under my bed. Stay. Chloe grabbed my hand. Now. We shoved the door. It didn't budge. The Watcher laughed. You are mine. The red lines erupted, piercing the thing's flesh. It shrieked, thrashing, as we pushed harder. The door creaked. Light spilled through, real light. Sunlight. Chloe met my eyes. Go. Not without you. She smiled. I'm already gone. The Watcher struck. Chloe dissolved into ash. I fell through the door. The woods were silent. Normal. Birds chirped. Sunlight filtered through autumn leaves. Springwood's church bell rang in the distance. I stumbled into town. People waved. Mrs. Higgins handed me a coffee. Rough night, hon? Miriam sat outside the diner, alive. Whole. She smiled. Morning, Lucas. I vomited in the gutter. The red lines were gone. But that night, scratching came from the walls. And when I looked in the mirror, my pupils were split. The town pretended everything was normal. Mom made meatloaf. The Walmart restocked. Old Man Ritter's cow won third prize at the county fair. But I knew better. The watcher wasn't gone, it was digesting. Miriam started it. She cornered me at the gas station, her eyes too bright. "You look different," she said, tilting her head. "Healthier." I didn't. I hadn't slept in weeks. The scratching followed me everywhere, in the walls, under the floorboards, inside my skull. And the hunger. God, the hunger. I'd catch myself staring at Mrs. Higgins' poodle, imagining how its ribs would crack. Then the Polaroids came back. The first showed Ethan and Chloe standing in the woods, their faces blurred, red lines glowing under their skin. The second was a close-up of the owl house, rebuilt and pristine. The third was me. Asleep. My split pupils glowing like embers. No postmark. No sender. Just a message, "Welcome home." The owl house looked untouched. No ivy. No rot. Fresh paint gleamed under the moonlight. The bald man, Gary, answered the door, whole and smiling. "Took you long enough." Inside, the chapel was packed. Men in hoods, women in white robes. Ethan sat at the altar, his throat unmarked, eyes normal. "Miss me?" Chloe stood beside him, alive. Whole. Her scarred arm bare. "What the hell is this?" I said. "A fresh start," Ethan said. "The watcher's gone. We're in charge now." Chloe stepped forward. "Join us, Lucas. No more hunger. No more fear." The crowd chanted, "Join, join, join." The red lines surged under my skin, hungry. Angry. I ran. Mom was setting the table when I burst in. "We need to leave. Now." She didn't look up. "Dinner's almost ready, honey." "Mom, listen." Her head snapped toward me. 6 black eyes blinked. "Sit. Down." The room tilted. The walls pulsed. Red lines crawled up Mom's arms, her neck, her face. "You can't run, Lucas. The door's inside you now." I backed into the hall. The floorboards creaked. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The watcher stood in the shadows. Not the owl. Not the antlers. Me. My reflection grinned, split pupils burning. "Told you you'd give in." I slammed the front door. The street was empty. Silent. Every house dark, every curtain drawn. Except Miriam's. Her porch light glowed. She rocked on the swing, humming. A red line snaked up her bare ankle. "You're one of them," I said. She smiled. "We're all one of them, Lucas. Even you." The woods were the only place left. No cult. No wheat field hell. Just trees and the icy November wind. I built a fire, huddled under a tarp, and waited to die. The hunger won first. I woke to blood on my hands, a dead rabbit at my feet. Its chest torn open, heart missing. The red lines glowed, satisfied. Chloe found me there. "You can't fight it," she said, tossing me a water bottle. "The watcher's not a thing. It's a cycle. You kill it, it grows back. Stronger." I scrubbed blood off my face. "Why me?" "Because you're the first who ever said no." She sat beside me. That's power here. And they're terrified of it. The fire crackled. For a moment, she looked human. What if I say no again? She leaned close. Then you'll die. Really die. No door. No farmhouse. Just gone. I stood. Better than this. She didn't stop me. The owl house burned easy. Gasoline and a match. Flames licked the fresh paint, swallowing the chapel, the altar, the lies. The crowd watched from the street, silent. Ethan stepped forward. You'll regret this. The red lines answered. They tore through him, through Gary, through the crowd. Blood soaked the grass. The watcher howled, inside me, around me, everywhere. Chloe appeared in the smoke. Now. We ran to the silos. The door stood open, rotting wheat spilling out. Close it, she said. Permanently. The red lines resisted. They wanted to feed. To grow. I stepped through. The field was dead. The farmhouse rotted. The sky rained ash. My reflection waited. You lose. No, I said. I choose. The red lines ripped free. They shredded the field, the house, the sky. The reflection screamed, dissolving. The door slammed. Springwood looked the same. Mom waved from the porch. Miriam gossiped at the diner. But the red lines were gone. The hunger? Quiet. For now. I sit here every night, recording this, watching the woods. The scratching's fainter, but it's there. In the walls. In the vents. And sometimes, when the moon's right, I see them, Ethan and Chloe, red lines glowing, waving from the trees. Waiting. Always waiting.